Mr. Chairman, this is Teresa. I think we're going to go ahead and get started, and we could, if we can get Mr. Alfred on the line later, we could possibly do his swearing in when he joins.
Understood.
Are you comfortable with that?
I am. We are live now, Teresa?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We want to welcome the public who is viewing us virtually. This is the first virtual Planning Commission meeting for the town of Hilton Head. I have not seen my fellow commissioners in some time. It's good to see your faces, and we look forward to a time when we can get together again in person. These are very, very unusual times. We do have a new member, and with technology, there are challenges, and we hope our new member, Stephen Alford, will be able to join us later on in the meeting. With that, Teresa, are we in compliance with FOIA?
Yes, sir.
And thank you. All right, we have a swearing-in ceremony for new and reappointed commissioners, and that would have included Mr. Alford, and I believe myself and Mr. Stevens will be serving another one-year term. So we are two returning commissioners. So I welcome LaVarn back to his seat next to mine when we're sitting together. So I'm going to turn it over to Stephen Ryan, the town's attorney, who is going to conduct the swearing-in ceremonies.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Stephen Ryan, staff attorney for the town of Hilton Head Island. Bear with me one moment, and we will begin the swearing in. I understand Mr. Alfred isn't with us. Mr. Perry, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
All right, thank you. Please make sure your mics are off so that I can hear, because I'm reading off a sign. Mr. Christian is with us, and as he said, Mr. Stevens. All right, everyone is present. Yes, Mr. Stevens.
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, sir. Thank you. All right. If you'll repeat after me, we'll administer the oath of office. Please repeat after me. I do solemnly swear.
I do solemnly swear.
I do solemnly swear
That I am duly qualified according to the Constitution of this state.
I am duly
that I am
qualified
by the Constitution of this state
To exercise the duties of the office to which I have been appointed.
To exercise the duties
of the office of which I have been appointed.
And that I will, to the best of my ability, discharge the duties thereof.
And to the
I
best
will,
of
to
my
the best of my abilities, discharge the duties.
And preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of this state and of the United States.
And preserve,
And
protect, and defend the Constitution of
this state and the United States.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. The oath has been rendered.
And I need to apologize to my colleague, Alan Perry. I failed to realize that he had been appointed to fill an unexpired term, and he's now serving his first full term. So I apologize for that oversight, Alan. And, welcome to your first full term.
Thank you very much, Peter. I appreciate that.
All right, Teresa, would you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Perry.
Here.
Mr. Stevens.
Here.
Ms. McGowan.
Here.
Mr. O'Neill.
Here.
Mr. Scanlon.
Here.
Mr. Theodore.
Here.
Mr. Christian.
Here.
And I believe we're anticipating Mr. Alfred joining us later.
Very good. Does the staff have any changes to the agenda?
No, sir.
Okay, can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make that motion.
Leslie and Michael seconds. Any discussion? All in favor? Teresa, would you call the roll?
Mr. Perry.
Approve.
Mr. Stevens,
Approve.
Ms. McGowan,
Approve.
Mr. O'Neill,
Approve.
Mr. Scanlon,
Approve.
Mr. Theodore,
Approve.
Mr. Christian.
Approve. All right, we have the minutes, believe it or not, from the February 19th, 2020 meeting of the Planning Commission, which was the last time we met in person. And we're going to go through this process by roll call. And if you have any changes to the minutes when Teresa calls your name, if you could provide those changes. So could I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make that motion.
Leslie, Michael seconds. Okay,
Second.
Teresa, would you call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mr. Perry,
Approve, as written.
Mr. Stevens,
Approved.
Ms. McGowan,
Approve.
Mr. O'Neill,
Approve.
Mr. Scanlon,
Approved.
Mr. Theodore,
Approved.
Mr. Christian.
Approve.
Thank you.
All right, Ann, I'm turning it over to you for citizen comments.
We don't have any at this point? I'm sorry. I'm sorry, am I incorrect? Oh, thank you, I'm sorry. Public comments concerning agenda items were to be submitted electronically via the town's open town hall portal. The portal closed at noon yesterday. All comments were provided to the Planning Commission for review and made part of the official record. Citizens were provided the option to sign up for public comment participation by phone during the meeting. The public comment period closed at noon yesterday. We had one request from a citizen to speak on the Arbor Nature rezoning application. During that agenda item, the chairman will call on the citizen to address the commission for 3 minutes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ann. All right, unfinished business, we have none. New business, election of officers. Our official term begins with the new fiscal year, which is July 1. And due to the pandemic, we were unable to appoint a nominating committee, but we are able to do this from the floor and elect officers, and we'll accept, all nominations from the floor. At this time, I'm open the floor for anyone who'd like to make a motion to nominate a commissioner to serve as chairman of the Planning Commission.
So moved.
I'll speak. I motion that we reappoint Mr. Christian to serve as chair for the Planning Commission.
I'll second that. Second.
Are there any other nominations?
I'll nominate Mr. Stevens to serve as vice chair.
I'll second that.
Leslie seconds.
Yes.
Are there any other nominations for chair or vice chair? All right, hearing none, this will be, we do these together or do these separately, Teresa?
Mr. Chairman, we can do them together.
Okay, well, let's do them together then, if you would call the roll.
Sure. Mr. Perry,
Approve.
Mr. Stevens,
Approve.
Ms. McGowan,
Approve.
Mr. O'Neill,
Approve.
Mr. Scanlon,
Approve both.
Mr. Theodore,
Approve both.
Mr. Christian.
Approve. Well, we thank you both. Thank you all for your faith in myself and Mr. Stevens. And LeVon, you want to say anything?
I appreciate the nomination once again and the confidence to execute the position. It'll be a pleasure to serve with you again, Mr. Christian.
Thank you for those kind words, as always, Mr. Stevens. Okay. We have a public hearing on a request on behalf of,
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman,
I'm sorry.
if you wouldn't mind appointing a secretary to serve for the new
Oh,
term.
I'm so sorry, Teresa. We would never want to leave you out.
Thank you.
Could we have a motion to appoint Teresa secretary of this august body?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Mike and one, thank you.
Okay, Teresa, would you call the roll?
Yes, sir, I'd be happy to. Mr. Perry,
Approve.
Mr. Stevens,
Approve.
Miss McGowan,
Approve.
Mr. O'Neill,
Approve.
Mr. Scanlon,
Approve.
Mr. Theodore,
Approve.
Mr. Christian.
Approved. And I apologize for the oversight, Madam Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, we have a public hearing on the one thing that the commission can do on its own volition, that is name, or in this case, rename a road. So we have STDV 001236-20020, a request from the town of Hilton Head Island to rename the oceanside portion of Firethorn Lane to Firethorn Way. The modification will result in new addresses, numbers, and street 31 Firehorn Lane, 32 Firehorn Lane, 33 Firehorn Lane, 34 Firehorn Lane, and 37 Firehorn Lane. The modification will result in new address number for two properties, 24 Firethorn Lane and 26 Firethorn Lane. And I understand that Brad Tadlock, our fire chief, will be making the presentation.
Yes, sir. Good morning, everyone. And I'll try to speak clearly so you can hear me through the mask. So what we have before you has probably occurred over the last 40 years, based on how the addressing was laid out and how we appointed addresses through the years. But we've come to this decision to request this because of some development in that area that we have run out of address points. And so what we're asking you today is to approve the 5 addresses on the Oceanside Firethorn Way so that we can change those and make them consistent with the other streets along the ocean side of South Forest Beach with the same addressing pattern. And that allows us then to renumber on the land side of Firethorn higher numbers. I would refer you to the background that gives, I believe, a good description. We had approached the owners on the ocean side with the request to rename that roadway Firewheel, and I spoke to 3 out of the 5 owners, and they pushed back on that. And let me state this: no one likes an address change. Fire rescue doesn't like them. No one likes them. We understand that, but with development and some of how the parcels were laid out outside of the PUDs, there are some very interesting addressing schemes that evolved over the years. And so the 5 on that side, the 3 I spoke to, agreed that if they could keep Firethorn in the name, they would consider that a reasonable option. And therefore, that allows us to change 5 addresses on that side, and the remaining addresses on Firethorn Way, or on Firethorn Lane, pardon me, do not change except those in the very back that you see, and I'll put the map up in just a second. That came about because they subdivided lots on Firethorn. They had half-acre lots, so they were allowed under the code to divide that into 2 lots. And I'll ask Teresa to put up the map, and I think you all have this, but in case you haven't, I'll try to. Can you see it? Can you all see it? So if you look to the ocean side, Firethorn Way, where the red line is struck through the lane, those are the numbers that the street, that small portion of the street, will be renamed, and then those 5 addresses will mirror the addresses you see up on Elderberry and Juniper and Laurel on that side. So we'll bring some consistency to that. And then on the other side, on Firethorn Lane in the very back, we have to change 26 and 24. So so we can have our addressing scheme back there consistent. And I mean, that's really the brief description of it. I think we've looked at it in a lot of different ways, and we don't, like I said, we don't like to change addresses, but this has evolved over the years to the point where this decision by staff today fixes this problem, and should not occur again on this street. And that's what most of the owners have asked for, especially the long-term residents on Firethorn Lane on the land side. Several of them supported me in that we need to fix this. It's not easy, but let's get it done. So with that, if you have any questions or comments.
And the way we'll do this under these virtual circumstances is I'll call on each commissioner. They have a question of the chief to please ask that question. Doesn't mean if I call on you, you have to have a question. But in the interest of making sure that we include everybody in the process, we're going to go through it individual by individual. Chief Tadlock, we very much appreciate your presentation. And Alan, do you have any questions for the chief?
No questions.
Okay. LeVarn, any questions for the chief?
Just one brief question, Chief. Just trying to look ahead, do you see any other areas that might be impacted by development that might cause some issues with addressing in that area?
Island-wide, you mean?
Just really in that area, in the South Forest Beach area, just trying to be proactive.
Well, typically we are looking proactively. I would tell you in many cases, we let the development create the change because people don't like the address change. And if someone doesn't develop a lot, then we've made them change their address where potentially there was no need. So yes, we are looking to make sure and try to identify areas where there's problems. But like in this case, the lots were subdivided, and that brought the issue to our attention because they were half-acre lots and they were allowed to divide. So yes, we are looking, but I can't promise you the others won't pop up because of how the addressing scheme was, how it was administered over the years. You know, it went from the developers in the 60s to the county in the 70s to the town in the 80s and 90s, and then fire rescue took it over in the 90s. So we've been trying to improve it as we go along. But there are, I'll be honest with you, there's gaps out there, and hopefully we can fix them without name changes to streets. Sometimes it's just a matter of changing the address on the homes along the street. But we are working towards that, yes. And in this area specifically, just so you know how we're looking at it, we went along the land side of Firethorn Lane, and we identified all the lots that could be subdivided, and we created address points in the future so that if they are subdivided, we have the addresses to give them. Some people may need to change their address, but we will have the process in place so that we don't have to rename the street or come up with other alternatives. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you for the education.
Leslie, any questions for the chief?
No, I have no questions.
Mark?
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Michael?
Yes, Chief, let me ask you this. Would you say that the neighborhood is resigned to this change, or are they hostile to it? I mean, in a word, where are the neighbors here?
The neighbors on the land side are very supportive. The owners and all 5 of the homes on the ocean side are rental homes. When I explained to them, initially they were pushed back very hard. Once they were able to keep Firethorn in the name, and they realized that their number would change to a consistent number, a lower number, they said they could accept that. So I felt like we kind of had a win-win.
Teresa, do we have any public commenters on this topic?
We did receive public comment through our town's open hall portal, and those comments were provided to you all via email yesterday. We do not have any callers.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
I would point out the map's not up any longer, but it's kind of ironic that the ocean side of Firethorn ended up with the highest numbers. They basically, the scheme started and went on the land side and then jumps all the way back to the ocean side. And there's no addressing standards out there that incorporates that type of scheme. You know, that's very confusing for emergency services, for e-delivery, for Pizza Hut, whoever it may be. That's confusing addressing. So how that little sliver of road wasn't recognized and addressed, you know, starting with the lower numbers on that side is kind of confusing. But the owners on Firethorn, what will become Firethorn Way, were acceptable if we kept Firethorn in the name, and then they realized they're going to have to change their numeral address, but they agreed to that.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Michael.
I wanted to ask, how do we go about notifying GPS and other services that this change is taking place once approved? And how long a process is that, so that delivery companies and others will be able to find this on GPS under the new name?
I can tell you we have started to notify those companies, but they are private companies with no regulation by us locally or that I'm aware of at any level to change the address. But we do notify them that it is changing. But I looked at a map of an online service the other day down there, and their roads aren't correct now, even for Juniper and Laurel. They show Hickory Lane going all the way across. So, but to your question, we do notify them, but we have no ability to enforce them to update their systems.
Thank you.
Todd, questions for the chief?
Yeah, Mr. Scanlon asked the one, I was curious how long it takes Google's and others to pick those up, because obviously with rentals, people like to go online and do street views and things like that, but you answered that. The other question I have is, why wouldn't 24 and 26 become 38A and B and 34A and B?
Having a single family home, we prefer not to provide A and B addresses for lots like that. And I can tell you the owner said he didn't want an A or B. We do have that in some areas of the community, and as we fix those. But in this instance, that's how this process got started, was it was given an A and a B so they could start construction, but they never wanted A and B. And as we tried to renumber is when we've realized the problem with the higher numbers being on the ocean side. And that's when we had to come up with the solution of either changing the name or readdressing the entire street and impacting everyone. So 24 and 26 will change if this is approved to coincide with 34, 38. Those are temporary numbers right now.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Todd. The only comment I have is, I feel the pain here. I live in a community called Jarvis Creek, and I have Jarvis Creek Lane, Jarvis Creek Way, and Jarvis Creek Court, and some of the addresses share the same number, and mail and other things are an issue. And Chief Tadlock, I'm sure you're aware of Old Fort Lane, Old Fort Way, and Old Fort Court in Hilton Head Plantation, and those are all confusing for both mail service, delivery service, and fire and rescue. So, doing this, especially doing it without duplicative numbers, is a blessing. All right, Teresa and staff had indicated that there were no callers on the line to provide comments directly to the commission today. We were provided with a list of comments via email yesterday. I will go one more time and I'll ask, are there there any other questions from among the commissioners for Chief Tadlock before we ask for a motion? All right, hearing none, do I have a motion to approve this request for the street naming as presented? Michael, LaVarn seconds. All right, Teresa, any further discussion? All right, Teresa, would you call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mr. Perry,
Approve.
Mr. Stevens,
Approve.
Ms. McGowan,
Approve.
Mr. O'Neill,
Approve.
Mr. Scanlon,
Approved.
Mr. Theodore,
Approved.
Mr. Christian.
Approved. And Chief and your staff, thank you very much for your work on this. We appreciate it very much. And we appreciate all you do during this pandemic and all of your EMTs, the firefighters, all the yeoman's work that you all have been doing and deserve an unbelievable amount of praise for putting yourselves in harm's way and keeping us all safe. We all thank you as a community for that.
Well, I appreciate that very much, and I'll pass that on to the troops. And
Please do, Chief.
been a long 5 months, and I'm afraid there's many more to come. But and it's good to see all of you, and I thank you for supporting this.
Take care, Chief.
You too. Thank you all.
Okay, next on our agenda, we have a public hearing, ZA 001245-2002, a request from the town of Hilton Head Island on behalf of Arbor Nature, LLC, to amend the official zoning map for the property located at 76 Mutton Road, parcel ID R510000002750000. The approved uses and density are either a wholesale landscape nursery and landscape contractor's office with outside storage at up to 6,000 square feet per net acre on 2.1 acres of the site, and residential at 8 units per net acre on the remaining 4.33 acres on the site, or residential at 8 units per net acre for the entire site. The request is to change the allowed uses and density to either a wholesale landscape nursery and landscape contractor's office with outside storage at up to 6,000 square feet per net acre, without any tree grinding or logging for the entire site, or residential at 8 units per net acre for the entire site. The subject property would remain in the PD1 Plan Development Mixed-Use Zone District in the Indigo Run Master Plan. And I understand before Nicole makes her presentation, we received 2 letters. One from Tom Taylor, actually 2 letters from Tom Taylor, and a letter from Curtis Coltrane regarding the commission's ability to hear this case. And you have before you both letters, and I know Curtis is on the line. And before we move to have Nicole make her presentation, are there any questions on either letter or of Curtis regarding our ability to hear this case and make a determination? Alan, any questions? Teresa,
Yes, sir.
could we go through and see if any of the commissioners have a question of Curtis? And specifically, we're talking about our ability to hear today's case and make a recommendation to the town council.
Yes, sir. I'll go through the roll.
Thank you.
Mr. Perry,
No questions at this time.
Mr. Stevens?
I believe that Mr. Coltrane will probably cover my question, but my question is in reference to, I guess we are still in a state of emergency or some sort of pandemic is why this is being presented this way.
You want to turn over to Curtis to answer?
Mr. Stevens, at this point in time, both the town and the state are still operating under a declared state of emergency. The town has the ability, under the terms of Code Section 57250, to adopt emergency ordinances in such conditions. In this case, the town has adopted an emergency ordinance that provides for, among other things, the conduct of a public hearing utilizing this format, which allows the public to see and hear the meeting as it goes on and to call in and deliver its comments during the term of the meeting. I mean, that's a nice thing, but the truth of the matter is that the town does have the authority to adopt this sort of ordinance. The town has done so, and I believe that moving forward with a public hearing under the express terms of the emergency ordinance that the town council has adopted is legal. The Freedom of Information Act provides for meetings by electronic means, which is what is happening here. This public hearing has been appropriately noticed by staff in compliance with the Planning Act. And I believe that there is no problem with the town doing this. I believe that the result of this meeting will be valid and enforceable.
Mr. Chairman, may I address that, please? Chester.
Chet, I'll give you 3 minutes.
Rules say 5 minutes, but that's all right. I think Mr. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Stevens, but I don't think your question was addressed to whether or not the town can hold a public hearing, but rather whether or not for this particular matter, the town should hold a public hearing. Curtis's opinion is that it's a valid public hearing. My opinion, along with Tom's, is we don't know whether or not it's a valid public hearing. And it is the landowner who is going to bear the burden there of the decision if this is not a valid public hearing. You know, I understand in the context of an emergency situation like this, where there are things that the town has to do and they're required to hold public hearings there. For example, the town council's adoption of the budget. That's got to be done by a certain time, and there has to be a public hearing there. This may be the only context in which that can occur. This particular rezoning, though, there's no compelling reason why this needs to go forward right now. What this will do is change the zoning to prohibit grinding and logging on the Leg of Mutton Road tract. The settlement agreement that the town entered into with Arbor Nature already requires that Arbor Nature cease logging and grinding activities at the Leg of Mutton, and they have already done that. So the grinding is no longer occurring at Leg of Mutton Road. Our concern is that we don't want to have Arbor Nature in the situation where a year, 2 years, 5 years down the line, somebody files suit to set aside that rezoning because of an invalid public hearing. The public hearing is legally required in the rezoning context, and if this public hearing is invalid, then the entire rezoning is invalid. We would ask that this matter be put off, because it's not an emergency matter, be put off until we're back to the point where we can have in-person public hearing meetings. I mean, nobody at the town has ever explained to me why this has to be done right now. It's just that, well, we want to move things forward.
Thank you, Chet, for those comments.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, those are valid points, and I just saw some of the letters that were submitted, and I just have a little bit of a concern for that, but I do understand that we want to try to move forward as well. That's the end of my question.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens.
Ms. McGowan?
Yeah, just one question. The planning commission's role is really to issue a recommendation to the council, in my understanding. So does that make our exposure less? Because it's merely advisory.
I'm uncertain what you mean by exposure.
Alleged exposure.
Exposure at all. I mean, the Planning Act requires a public hearing. In this case, the town council has delegated that authority to the planning commission. Again, I come back to the notion that someone's going to sue you 6 years from now. Number one is at odds with both the statute of limitations in this state and the Planning Act, which requires somebody to do something in 60 days. I believe that the terms of the Planning Act, the terms of the town's emergency ordinance, and the Freedom of Information Act have all been complied with here. The town, under the settlement agreement that was made in connection with this case, is required to process this rezoning. And while one might suggest that it would be better if you wait until there's an in-person meeting, no one has any idea at all as to when that might occur. And there's simply no reason for any part of the town, be it town council, be it any of the boards and commissions appointed by town council, in my view, to cease their activities because we have to proceed in a way different from the way we went forward 8 months ago. Again, back to, I believe that the governing laws with respect to this particular public hearing have been complied with, and the result of it will be valid.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Chad, let's go through all of the commissioners first. Thank you. Teresa?
Mr. O'Neill?
Yeah, it's just one question. Have there been any other circumstances since the pandemic began where this same situation applies, aside from the budget, where a public hearing was required and accommodated?
Not aware of that. The town council first addressed this sort of hearing in ordinances that were adopted, I want to say, in June. But again, as Mr. Christian pointed out, it's now been, February since y'all last met, and I don't, as a practical matter, too. I mean, I see nothing wrong with any board or commission of the town moving forward with its duties, utilizing the methodology that is in place to handle the current situation that prohibits or certainly discourages having an in-person meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Mr. Scanlon?
Yes, Teresa, may I ask, do we have anybody signed up to speak today at this particular session on this topic?
We have Mr. Williams.
Okay. All right, then no further questions.
Thank you, Michael.
Mr. Theodore?
Yeah, I have a question. I might be jumping ahead of the presentation, but I think it's important to understand, so I can understand, and Curtis, you may be able to answer this. When I read the description of what's happening, is the zoning change just taking away the grinding and the I can't remember what the other was, but those elements are being kind of restricted of the property? That's the only change that's being made?
If Terry or Nicole is here, I think it's a little broader than that. It does restrict the grinding type activities. It also changes, I think, the way previously the landscape business aspect of the property was limited to a part of the property, and the housing part was limited to a part. Based on my conversations with the manager and other people involved in the settlement, the intention was to change it so that following the rezoning, the landscape business could occupy the entire site if the owner so chose, or the housing component could occupy the entire site if the owner so chose. If I'm wrong about that, I think Terry and Nicole can straighten it out, but that's my understanding.
Curtis, you're correct. This is Nicole Dixon. And Todd, I'll get into that in my rezoning presentation. I'll go through the whole, what we're proposing and the background behind it all.
Okay, the reason why I asked that, I was just trying to understand if it was just a technicality of limiting the use on that property, but it sounds like it's also allowing an expansion of the landscape business side of the use. Now, the way I read it, I thought that on a residential side, even as it exists today, the entire parcel could be residential, was kind of my understanding.
With the original rezoning, there were 2 separate tracts with the separate uses assigned to each one.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to understand what the implications were, because if it was just restricting the use of grinding, I don't understand, why that would be that difficult, knowing that that was going to be relocated to another site. So, okay. That just helped me clarify this, sort of the technical aspects of this. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Todd. And bring it back to me. Chet, I'll give you one more crack at this, and then we need to decide whether to move on or not as a commission.
Six-month statute of limitations on rezoning, provided that there's been then there hasn't been substantial compliance with the public notice requirements, and the entire process falls because that public hearing is legally required. Mr. Theodore, you're correct. Right now, under the current zoning, the entire tract can be used for 8 units per acre. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And also, I'm not here as a member of the public. I am here representing the property owner. I am entitled to be in the room with everybody else, and I would appreciate it, Teresa, if you stopped muting my video and audio.
Curtis, any comment on Chet's concern about the fact that there is no statute of limitation?
Well, there's always a statute of limitations, but more importantly, the 60-day thing requires substantial compliance with the notice requirements, and that has been achieved. I mean, there's no one has said out loud that the staff has failed to properly advertise this public hearing. The Freedom of Information Act notifications have been complied with, and the meeting is being conducted in compliance with the ordinance adopted by town council last month governing these things. So,
Thank you, Curtis. We've received input from several individuals on this. We've had a discussion this morning on the issue, and for the foreseeable future, we don't know when we're going to be able to meet in person again. And given these circumstances, we need to move on with the town's business. And I'm going to pose this: unless someone makes a motion that we not move forward with considering this particular item, I will ask Nicole to make her presentation, and we will move forward with this particular presentation and make a recommendation up or down through the town council. Is there someone want to make a motion that we not hear this particular item because of the public hearing issue that was raised? All right, hearing none. Nicole, please make your presentation.
Thank you.
Go to your presentation. I have to go to blue jeans and hit share. Yep.
They don't see it.
Yeah. I don't come up.
Sorry, give me a second. We're trying to pull the PowerPoint up. Okay, sorry about that.
Thank you, Nicole. Please proceed.
Okay, so do you see my screen then, the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay. So as mentioned earlier, the town is the applicant for this rezoning. I'll be presenting on behalf of the town. Rezoning application number ZA-001245-2020. The request is to rezone the property located at 76 Mutton Road, known as Arbor Nature.
Use the keyboard.
There we go. How did you do that? Okay. The property in blue is the site proposed to be rezoned. It is surrounded by vacant town-owned property to the east in this picture, Magnolia Place townhome development to the north, Indigo Run residential homes to the west, and a contractor's office and art gallery to the south. The subject property currently consists of one residential home and Arbor Nature business. The northern portion of the lot is primarily wetlands. Okay, as you can see from the zoning map, the property is currently zoned PD1, part of the Indigo Run master plan. This rezoning would not change the zoning of the property, but would change the uses assigned to the property from what was originally permitted with the original zoning back in 2006, which was either a wholesale landscape nursery and landscape contractor's office with outside storage at up to 6,000 square feet per net acre on 2.18 acres of the site and residential at 8 units per net acre on the remaining 4.33 acres of the site, or residential at 8 units per net acre for the entire site. The proposed use is either a wholesale landscape nursery and landscape contractor's office with outside storage at up to 6,000 square feet per net acre, without any grinding or logging for the entire site, or residential at 8 units per net acre for the entire site. This is the survey that went along with the original rezoning back in 2006 and illustrates the separate tracts that I just mentioned that were designated during that original rezoning. But I would like to note that the property was never subdivided into separate pieces and remains today as one 6.7 acre lot. On your screen, the lot is outlined in blue on this aerial. Now I'll get into a little bit of the background and how we got to this request before you today. In 2010, the town was made aware that Arbor Nature had also been using the property for grinding and logging activity. The town informed the property owner that grinding and logging activity is considered to be a waste-related services other than waste treatment plants use and is not permitted on the property. Arbor Nature disputed the town's position on the use of the property for grinding and logging in an ongoing litigation. After several years of litigation about the use of the property, the town and Arbor Nature entered into a settlement agreement. As part of that settlement agreement, the town leased and has now sold 4 acres of town property at Summit Drive to Arbor Nature for their operations, which will include the grinding and logging activity. Arbor Nature has since ceased grinding and logging on the subject property as required per the settlement agreement. The settlement agreement also requires the town to rezone the property on Mutton to specify that the permitted uses available on the property do not include grinding and logging activity. Now we'll get into the criteria. I won't read through each one as it's in your staff report, but I will touch on some of it and explain why staff is recommending approval. For criteria 1, staff finds the application is in conformance with the goals and strategies of the land use element of the comprehensive plan, which calls for appropriate mix of land uses, flexibility to address appropriate location of service or commercial uses in PUDs with respect to dense residential areas, and to evaluate the locations of non-conforming uses to determine areas appropriate for rezoning. The proposed rezoning will modify the existing permitted land use to accommodate the desire of nearby residents and the town's quality of life. It will remove an intense service land use from the property, which is located near a concentration of residential use, and will ensure that the proposed use of the property will come into conformance. So staff finds criteria 1 is met. Criteria 2, the application proposes to rezone the property to continue to allow the wholesale landscape nursery and landscape contractor's office with outside storage at up to 6,000 square feet per net acre, but without any grinding and logging activity. The proposed zoning allows the site to be alternatively developed with residential use at 8 units per net acre. The subject property is surrounded by Magnolia Place townhomes and Indigo Run, which are both residential uses, as well as a contractor's office and art gallery. The proposed rezoning will allow a use that is more compatible with the uses allowed on other property in the immediate vicinity and will remove an intense land use from the property, which is located near a concentration of residential use and has been a nuisance to the surrounding neighbors. Staff finds criteria 2 is met. For criteria 3, the application is appropriate for the land because the rezoning will allow the wholesale landscape nursery and landscape contractor's office with outside storage to continue, but without any grinding and logging activity. It will allow the site to be alternatively developed with residential use. It will remove an intense land use from the property, which is located near a concentration of residential use and has been a nuisance to the surrounding neighbors, and it is required per the settlement agreement between the town and Arbor Nature. Staff finds criteria 3 is met. For criteria 4, staff finds the rezoning would fulfill a community need. The town has received complaints about the noise impacts of the grinding occurring on the subject property for many years. The proposed rezoning will remove an intense land use from the property, which is located near a concentration of residential use and has been a nuisance to the surrounding neighbors. The staff finds criteria 4 is met. For criteria 5, the town's overall zoning program allows flexibility in the PD1 zoning district by allowing land uses and assigned density to change to address changing needs in the community. The proposed rezoning will allow the PD1 zoning designation to remain, but will remove an intense land use from the property, which is located near the residential use and has been a nuisance to the surrounding neighbors, and staff finds the application meets criteria 5. Criteria 6, the proposed zoning does avoid creating an isolated zoning district because the existing base zoning district will remain PD1, and staff finds the application meets criteria 6. The criteria 7, the proposed zoning would allow the subject property to be put to a reasonably viable economic use because it will allow the site to remain as currently developed, but will remove the grinding and logging activity, which is a nuisance to the surrounding residential neighbors. The rezoning also allows the site to be redeveloped with residential use, making the site more compatible with the uses in the vicinity. Still allows the property to be put to a reasonably viable economic use. Staff finds criteria 7 is met. Criteria 8, the site has direct access to Mutton Road and already has adequate infrastructure and public facilities serving the existing development, and finds that criteria 8 is met. Criteria 9, the proposed rezoning is appropriate due to the changes in the area because it will remove an intense land use from the property, which is located near a concentration of residential use and has been a nuisance to the surrounding neighbors, and is also required per the settlement agreement between the town and Arbor Nature. Staff finds criteria 9 is met. The staff is recommending that the Planning Commission recommends approval to Town Council because all criteria for the zoning application are met. Staff is recommending approval with the following 4 conditions: that grinding is prohibited on this site, that logging or storage of logs is prohibited on this site, that tree or log length trailer trucks carrying logs are prohibited from entering this site, and the dropping of logs is prohibited on this site. Should the Planning Commission vote on this application today, the next steps would be at this time going to Town Council for first reading on August 18th and second reading planned for September 15th. That's all I have. Do you have any questions for me?
Hey, Teresa, would you go through the roll and ask each of the commissioners if they have any questions of Nicole?
Yes, sir. Mr. Perry.
Yeah, Nicole, just want to make sure that, or if you could comment on the responses that you have received from the neighboring communities.
Based on the public notice for this rezoning?
Yeah.
I did not receive any comments from the adjacent
Okay,
communities or.
Thank you,
Okay.
Ellen.
Mr. Stevens.
He muted himself.
Mr. Stevens, if you could unmute on your end.
Forgot.
Thank
Okay,
you.
yeah, thank you. I think you covered a couple of questions. One was kind of how we got to this point of coming up with this particular arrangement. What was the previous zoning for this particular property? Was the acreage, units per acre the same, or has it been upzoned a little bit?
Well, it hasn't been upzoned, so When it was rezoned in 2006, there were two separate tracts designated for the two different uses. So they were allowed to have the wholesale landscape nursery and the contractor's office with outside storage at 6,000 square feet per net acre on 2.1 acres of the site, and residential at 8 units per net acre on that remaining 4.33 acres of the site. Or alternatively, they could have residential at 8 units per net acre for the entire site. So that's not changing with this. So they could, for this proposed rezoning, they can still have that 8 units per net acre for the entire site, or they can have the wholesale landscape nursery at 6,000 square feet per net acre for the entire site instead of being separated into the two different tracts. Does that
Okay.
answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. I believe I saw one public comment about the potential of this tract being used for workforce housing or giving it even some more flexibility.
Someone made a suggestion that instead of the 8 units per net acre, that it went to 12 units for affordable housing. But the 8 units per net acre was what was decided in the settlement agreement. So that's not something that I can change.
And that's something that may potentially come back to us sometime in the future.
Should a developer want to come in and increase the density, they would have to go through this rezoning process to do so.
Okay. Well, I'm vaguely familiar with the issues that have been going on this particular piece of property. And I am happy that the town and the staff have worked so hard to kind of get to this point to make something work. My comments are in reference to hopefully that if there are other properties that are in our communities that have these kind of challenges with land use, residential, and businesses, that we will certainly be afforded the same efforts to try to find a way to make it work. With that being said, I'm a little concerned about working so hard to accommodate this particular arrangement. Hopefully this is just a one-off, or if this is setting a precedence for how we're going to deal with these kinds of issues going forward in the future. So with those are my comments as far as some of the other things that we're involved in here in our community when it comes to residentials being next to businesses and how we use the land and how development is happening. Because this is such a tight island, I would just say that maybe this is a one-time only situation, but I hope that staff in town will be able to work just as hard to address other challenges that we may have with other properties in our community. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens.
Ms. McGowan?
Yeah, I have one question. The zoning district PD1, these changes just apply to these properties, or are there other properties in town that would follow the same regulations?
This only applies to this property. With the Indigo Run master plan, there's designated uses and assigned densities for each tract. And so this rezoning is just changing the use of this specific property.
Okay, and no other properties then? Okay.
No.
All right. Thank you. That's all I have right now.
Mr. O'Neill?
No questions.
Mr. Scanlon?
No questions. I believe we're beating a done deal here.
Mr. Theodore?
Yeah, I have a question. I just want to make sure I understand. So the residential stays the same. That what's existing and what's proposed is the same. The difference is the landscape business can occupy the entire site in the future versus where it is limited to the 2-acre parcel. Is that correct?
That's correct. And any expansion of what they're doing now would require a development plan review application process. A good portion of the site, the northern portion of the site is wetlands anyway. It would not be able to be developed without, additional permits for that. But any redevelopment of the site or expansion requires the applicant to go through the development plan review process where we would be checking for, LMO requirements, stormwater, wetlands, all of those things.
Would that also, I'm not sure where they are today in terms of grandfathering in. I know they sold off that parcel for the townhomes that are there. If anything is done in the future with the landscape business, would the separation buffers be required between that townhome residential and any future landscape expansion?
Yes, all LMO requirements would need to be met if they were to redevelop the site.
Okay. So, and then just a clarity question. If it's 8 acres and say 2 acres is wetlands, if they did 6,000 square feet of landscape building structures per acre, would that be 48,000 square feet, or would that be less the acreage of wetlands that are on the property?
You would not subtract the wetland acreage of the property because in this instance, it's freshwater wetlands, I believe.
Okay.
You would only subtract tidal wetlands when you're looking at density. So depending on how those wetlands are designated, I believe they're freshwater, but I'm not sure. So if they were freshwater, they would count in their density allotment. If it's tidal wetlands, then they would not count.
Okay. And just out of curiosity, are they going to run a landscape business or, because I guess, I mean, they're in the tree business.
They also have the wholesale landscape business that they run there, and that's what they're continued to allow to do.
Okay. All right. That answered my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. All right, Chet, if you would like to address the commission at this time, and I would ask that you address your comments to the approval or disapproval of this rezoning request, not a continued debate on whether or not we should be hearing it.
Most certainly, Mr. Chairman, but as far as whether or not you ought to be hearing it, I would ask that Tom Taylor's letter to you of June 30, 2020, Curtis Coltrane's letter to you of July 8, 2020, and Mr. Taylor's letter to you of July 10, 2020 be entered into the record and included with the minutes of this meeting.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other comments, Chet?
Well, just to correct some of Nicole's chronology, she had said in 2010, Arbor Nature was notified that they can't do grinding on the property. That's incorrect. There's January 5, 2010, Ann Siren wrote a letter to Adam Congrove that says, in part, based on the allowed uses for Tract A, staff confirms that composting and wood grinding operations are in accordance with the Town of Hilton Head Island Land Management Ordinance. Based on that letter, Mr. Congrove went out and spent a lot of money building that tree grinding business there. It was only in 2015 that the town decided, well, no, you can't do grinding there. And in a letter from Terry Lewis to Adam Congrove dated September 4, 2015, the town told Mr. Congrove that. That's what ultimately led to the litigation. As far as what has been agreed to, excuse me, the settlement agreement, well, I have a copy here. The settlement agreement says that grinding and logging are prohibited on the property. The staff recommendation goes a little bit further than that. Mr. Congrove's okay with that. This is all part of the deal to get everything settled between the town and Arbor Nature. It needs to be done, but again, I don't know that it needs to be done right now. Thank you.
So I take it you're in favor of the settlement agreement, not not the timing of it.
Yeah, the settlement agreement needs to be implemented, but Mr. Congrove's not in any rush to do that. If there are two ways to do something, one that is surely correct, the other way that may be correct, certainly the better course of action is to follow the path that you know is correct.
Okay,
but yes, it needs to be implemented, yes.
But you are in favor of the settlement agreement?
No question, yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, appreciate that input. All right, rather than go through the entire roll again and ask if there are any follow-up questions, if you'd like to just raise your hand if you have any additional questions for Nicole. Okay, the chair would then entertain a motion whether to approve the staff recommendation to go to the town council as presented.
So moved.
Okay, Michael, and I think Todd had his hand up a little bit faster than Mark did. Okay, so Michael moved, Todd Theodore seconded. Any further discussion? All right, Teresa, would you please call the roll?
Yeah,
I'm
Mr.
sorry,
Chairman.
Varn. Go ahead, Varn, I'm sorry.
I would just like to repeat my comments for the record. Again, I appreciate what staff in town has done to put this deal together. And going forward, if this is how we're going to do business, I would ask that we accommodate other challenges that may be in our community for properties that have these kinds of issues. For the record.
Hopefully we don't have to settle and file a lawsuit, LaVarn. All right, Teresa, would you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Perry,
Yes, I approve the motion and moving it forward to town council.
Mr. Stevens,
I approve the motion.
Ms. McGowan,
Approve the motion.
Mr. O'Neill,
Approve.
Mr. Scanlon,
Approved.
Mr. Theodore,
Approved.
Mr. Christian.
Approve. I thank you all. That ends that portion of our agenda, and I believe we have a staff report from Carol Ladd, who we have not seen for a long time, and she is going to give us an update on our plan, which staff has been working on behind the scenes for some time, and is going to give us an update. So Taylor, the floor is yours.
Hello. Good morning,
Taylor's here
everyone.
to take the floor.
Good morning. We're gonna get the slides up. Do we need to do screen share? Oh, wait, that's Nicole's. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Taylor Ladd, and I'm Senior Planner and Project Lead for our plan. I'm excited to be here today to present the first of 2 information sessions about our plan. And today, this presentation will take about 15 or 20 minutes, just so you're prepared. We've got a lot to cover. My goal is to provide the Planning Commission, Town Council, and the island community with an overview of our plan and what to expect when it becomes available at the end of this month. For today's session, as a refresher, I will briefly go over what our plan is. Then I will cover the plan's contents, layout, and structure, and in a general overview of sections 1, 2, and 6 of the plan. The authority for a local government to undertake planning and to adopt zoning and land development regulations is granted through the Local Government Comprehensive Planning Enabling Act. This legislation requires us to establish a planning commission and to have a comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan is required to project future planning out 20 years. So our current plan that we're operating under is for 2010 to 2030. By law, we're also required to reevaluate it at least every 5 years and do a complete update every 10. So this year we're due for a 10-year update. This was identified by Town Council as a 2019 priority for adoption this year in compliance with state requirements. And it will be future planning out to 2040. This update process has created a new plan for Hilton Head Island branded Our Plan. And it has been in progress since May 2019. The town's comprehensive plan is a very important document that impacts everything the town does for not only its operations, but also for the community. It is the official policy and planning guide that identifies the course our community should take to grow, address change, and make progress for the next 20 years. State legislation also defines the components that should be included in the plan: inventory of existing conditions, statements of need and goals, implementation strategies, community and citizen participation, and 9 elements. Leeway is provided for communities to address each component at a level of detail that may be needed due to unique conditions and circumstances, specifically with the 9 elements. A municipality can add more elements as needed. For example, the town added a recreation element in 2005. The significance of our plan for this 10-year update is that it has carried forward the momentum and efforts from the Our Future community initiative the town did in 2017 to 2018. The Our Plan brand is a derivation of Our Future plus comprehensive plan. Our Future was an extensive engagement and visioning project the town launched to hear from the community. This timeline shows how the Our Future effort, shown in green on the left, fed into our plan. Our Future produced the Hilton Head Island Vision and Strategic Action Plan, which was adopted by Town Council in 2018. That document was utilized extensively by staff in the community to help develop our plan. The only change between the two is the 7 pillars identified in Our Future were redefined as core values for our plan. A significant aspect of Our Future is that it produced a vision for the island for the next 20 years. The vision is reinventing sustainability again. This means the town of Hilton Head Island will focus on the revitalization and modernization of its economy and infrastructure while building an inclusive and diverse community and economy. For our plan, sustainability is the cross-section of environment, society, and economy, where a community balanced in these 3 things has viable economic development, a resilient built environment, and equitable social conditions. Our Future started as a town council initiative, but it was embraced by the community and as a reflection of the island, its culture, and people. The vision came from the island community. Stakeholders and community members of Hilton Head Island developed 4 different options for a vision of the island's future. This vision of reinventing sustainability again is what the island community chose out of the 4 options. The new comprehensive plan, our plan, is intended to help usher this vision forward by directing the town's focus and parameters for future policy and decision-making. Directly from the Our Future effort, as I mentioned, are these 7 important core values that represent the island's priorities and future aspirations. The core values were developed in response to the community input, comments, feedback, and direction during the Our Future process. They are excellence, environment, economy, inclusive, connected, regional, and infrastructure. Historically, the town's comprehensive plans have been built and designed around the state's list of elements. There's been a chapter for each element that addresses information about the town with goals and implementation strategies. This is how our current comprehensive plan is arranged. Our plan is different. It is structured instead around the core values. Continuing the community engagement precedent set by Our Future, the town invited community members, anchor institutions, and stakeholders to participate in advisory work groups with a lead development team to help structure our plan around the core values. The only elements specifically addressed in our plan are recreation and priority investment. The recreation element has been replaced by a Parks and Recreation section that was supported by a task group of local Parks and Rec advocates, experts, and community members. Priority investment is and has been about the town's capital improvements program. I will be discussing both of these sections in more detail at the next information session. The Planning Commission is authorized as a recommending body for the comp plan by the State Enabling Act I mentioned earlier. Given their important position in the adoption of this plan for the town, commissioners have been integrated through the Our Plan process. Members of the Comprehensive Plan Committee are serving the project on the Our Plan development team, which has been the project's leadership group of 8 members appointed by Town Council. Other commissioners participated in at least one of the Our Plan advisory groups. So for the commissioners, a lot of this information so far is familiar to you. For the adoption process, the Comprehensive Plan Committee will make a recommendation to the Commission. The Commission will then make a recommendation for our plan's adoption to Town Council by resolution. Then Town Council has the important overarching role to hold a public hearing about our plan and adopt it by ordinance after 2 readings. This concludes my overview about our plan. So now let's talk about what's in the plan. In its contents, we have the front matter, 5 main sections, and 2 reference sections. The plan is written so that each section flows and complements the other, but any section can also stand alone. The writing is a blend of technical information with a conversational style intended to be interesting yet informative while maintaining its functionality as a town document. Today I'm presenting an overview of sections 1, 2, and 6. Started at the beginning. This is the front cover for our plan. Staff chose to develop an artistic cover that is indicative of the island and reflective of its natural environment with the land, beach, sea, and sky. The striping and color scheme shown is repeated throughout the document content and graphics. The front inside cover formally has our logos and summarizes the details of the plan's adoption. Moving on to section 1, our purpose and process. This section houses all the information I just went over at the beginning of this presentation. The genesis of our plan, the vision, what a comprehensive plan is, timelines, who was involved, and the adoption process. This is a typical layout for the content in this and mostly all the sections of the plan. There's main content with spotlight information in solid boxes and information margins with extraneous information, photographs, graphics, or definitions relevant to content in the main text. And cross-references are provided, as shown on the right there in the column, to link content to other sections, figures, tables, or subjects elsewhere in the document. This will play a larger role in the eventual interactive PDF version of our plan, where these cross-references will be hyperlinked. Section 2, our community, is where the elements come into play. While our plan is not organized around the elements, staff has ensured they are prevalent throughout to maintain consistency with the state requirements. This section accomplishes a few things. 1, it serves as an overview and guide about the island and the town. It has the island history, existing conditions, and data organized by element. 2, since prior versions of the comp plan houses data and information by element chapters, it was logical to carry that organization forward into our plan for new data. This section connects our plan to prior versions of the comprehensive plan so that, for instance, population data can be tracked from one version to the next over the years. This section strengthens the tie between the state regulations and our plan. And 4, this section defines each element specifically for Hilton Head Island. The elements in our plan sections use this symbology. The 2 elements, Parks and Recreation and Priority Investment, have their own sections, as I mentioned. They are not included in this section. Because of all the graphics, pictures, and tables in this section, it looks a little different from the rest of our plan. Each element is broken down into multiple subjects or topics. A page will have one or more subject titles with content explaining the graphics and detailing specifics. On the same or facing page will be the subject graphics. In this case, we have a map with a general map legend. There may also be supporting information, such as a more specific legend for a map as shown here, and other spotlight information. For the next few slides, I will be showing a preview for some of the graphics from the history section and each element. The island history is presented in a graphic timeline across 4 pages, starting with the Native American habitation in 8000 BC through today. On the timeline, the information margin spotlights more details for specific events or places. The Cultural Resources section presents information about island culture. It also includes the arts, venues, and historic sites information. In Natural Resources, there's a range of information from a map of the island watersheds to important fauna for the island, like sea turtles and piping plovers. Information like what is shown here is more than what the state might require for this element, but it is included in our plan for a few reasons. One, it reflects what the island community values and what was brought to the table by the community during the development of our plan. 2, consideration of the island fauna, like sea turtles and plovers, plays an important role in town initiatives pertaining to the beach, such as beach renourishment, and our collaboration with the state for protection efforts and monitoring. And 3, it provides the town an opportunity to educate residents, visitors, and outsiders about the unique qualities of the island. The population section provides an overview of the island's demographics, age, income, etc., using the most recently available census data, which in this case is mostly from the 2018 5-year estimates. As part of the periodic revision process for our plan, things like these graphics will be updated to reflect current data, such as from this year's census. Similarly, housing section reviews specific data having to do with housing units, cost burden, and housing tenure on the island, using census data and the recent workforce housing assessment. This section is about civic resources. Community facilities are town resources, such as town-owned land and fire stations. Other community resources are presented as well, such as schools and libraries. Economic development continues the presentation of the census information with local resource data having to do with the economy. On this screenshot, we're looking at information about the island's labor shed commuters, employment, and visitor population. Land use is specific to how the island land is utilized. This helps to guide community development and planning, such as the zoning map shown here. This section also includes a land use map with supporting data, a map of the island planned unit developments, and municipal limits. Finally, transportation presents a discussion about the island's road network and airport. The island's pathways are reviewed in the Parks and Recreation section. Our last section to discuss today is Section 6, Definitions and Index. This section is intended to support our plan as a reference for people who are reading or using the document. The definitions section provides more information for unique or town-defined terms used throughout the document. The index is another reference for our plan to help users quickly find specific topics or terms. In the interactive PDF version, the page numbers in the index will be hyperlinked. Finally, this is our current path to adoption timeline. As you can see, some meeting dates are still to be determined. As dates are finalized, I will be keeping the community updated through the Our Plan Facebook page, and the town's web calendar will also be updated. The Our Plan draft will be published at the end of this month with the development team's agenda packet. The development team is meeting August 10th at 2 p.m. to make their recommendation of our plan for the Comprehensive Plan Committee. Their meeting will be a live stream virtual meeting with the public comment options available that have been for all of their town meetings at this time. And this will kick off the official adoption process for our plan. The next Our Plan information session will be the August 12th Planning Commission meeting. Oh, I'm sorry, August 19th. We changed it. People flagging me down in the room here. Sorry, I apologize about that. It's August 19th. By then, our plan will be out in the public, so I'll be going over a little more detail for sections 3, 4, and 5 to assist reviewers and citizens with interpreting its layout, function, and content. Likely in September, we'll be hosting a workshop about our plan for Town Council and the Planning Commission, and then staff anticipates our plan should be adopted in October. This concludes my presentation, and I really appreciate the opportunity to present a preliminary review of our plan to commissioners, council, and the island community. I look forward to working with all of you through the rest of the process. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Taylor, for that very, very comprehensive overview of those sections. More to come. Teresa, would you go through and ask each of the commissioners if they have any questions of Taylor at this time?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Perry?
You know, I don't have any questions at this time, but Taylor, I just want to say that, you know, you and all the committee members that have been involved with this, I think you're doing a great job, and I can't wait to see the completed finished product.
Thank you.
Mr. Stevens?
I echo Mr. Perry's comments. It was happy to be a part of giving some input into this plan, and it's nice to see it come forward now. So we're looking forward to it. Thank you, Taylor, for your work.
Ms. McGowan?
Taylor, the graphics and the format of the plan look great. I'm really looking forward to getting my hands on it.
I've been hearing that a lot. It's been a group effort.
Mr. O'Neill?
And not necessarily a question, but certainly a comment. I've had the opportunity to be with this right from the vision project management team through the community groups, through the group sessions, through the 12 groups that we had working, and I'm amazed at how it's come together. I had my questions and how you guys were going to make sense out of all this, but I think you've done just a wonderful job.
Mr. Scanlon?
Yes, I would also say that Taylor and her entire team have done an unbelievable job in pulling this all together. My only question is the August 10th meeting. I don't know that, how did that date get selected, date and time get selected for the development team meeting? Yes.
That date was selected just based on backward planning for when we knew other benchmarks needed to be met for the adoption process. And it also had to do with a packed meeting calendar for August when we're making up on the backlog of meetings for all of the towns, boards, and commissions that were held up during our absence for COVID. So that's
I understand, but as a member of the development team and as a chairman of the Comprehensive Plan Committee, I don't believe I was ever asked about the dates. And I will be away from the island, quite a ways from the island during that period of time. And I just wished I'd kind of known about that. Thank you.
Mr. Theodore?
No, great job, Taylor, and everybody that contributed to the process on that. I do have a question to Taylor, just out of curiosity. These past 3 months or so, as we were shut down, how did that affect your process?
Well, a lot of what has been happening behind the scenes has been the development of the graphics and the synthesis of all the input we got last year. So thankfully, we were able to complete all of our work group meetings prior to the shutdown, and then any residual information I needed, I was able to reach out via phone and email to development team members to get the rest of their input. So really, it kind of coincided well with the drafting and production side of our plan. So we were able to kind of buckle in and knock out the production aspect of it, which took a good bit of effort and time. So it just worked out really well with the timing.
Okay, well, and that's what I thought. So the biggest thing is this will be a kind of a pretty substantial release of kind of what you've been doing for the past several months of being able to pull everything together.
Absolutely. It'll be the culmination of what we've been working on since our future kicked off in 2017, but definitely specifically since we kicked off working with the work groups back in May. So this is a very exciting thing coming up with the publishing of this at the end of this month.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, good job with it.
Thank you, Todd. And if I can bring it back and just pull together all of the comments, Taylor, you and your team have just done an outstanding job with this, and we look forward to the next steps. And as Leslie says, we love to get our hands on the document, and we don't mean because we want to take it and redo it. And hopefully Leslie's not going to do all those lovely graphics, but maybe she has that in mind. But it does look and read very, very well. And congratulations to you and your group. My question is a administrative one. Will the August 10th meeting be the last meeting of the development team?
Yes, it will.
Okay, and then the development team will go away, and then it will move over to the Comprehensive Planning Committee, and then a recommendation to the full commission?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other questions? And we'll not do a second round, but if you have another question, if you raise your hand of Taylor, otherwise we'll move on. We've had a busy morning and a learning curve on this new way of meeting. Okay. Our next meeting, as we alluded to, is August the 19th. And Teresa will get an agenda out to us. At that time, we will go over all of the committee assignments. And, if you're unfamiliar, where you are presently assigned, we have, the Land LMO Committee. Leslie is currently chairing that with Todd and Michael Scanlon. The Comprehensive Planning Committee, Michael is currently chairing that with myself as an ex officio member, Mark and Alan Perry. And then the Rules Committee is LaVarn and Mark O'Neill. And obviously we need to fill some of those gaps. I will be in touch with each of you individually to talk about those assignments and, where you'd like to be. And LaVarn, I haven't forgotten you. Chair of the Gullah Geechee Task Force, and there are several commissioners that are on. Todd is also on that. Carolyn went off, so we're going to have to plug that particular gap. And LaVarn, you and I need to talk about how we want to handle that, and I'll speak to you personally about that, and then we'll go over that at the next meeting. Any other business that needs to be brought before the commissioner for the good of the order? All right, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion that we adjourn. Well done, everyone.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, thank you, LaVarn. Leslie seconds. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
We wouldn't have Teresa call the roll. All right, thank you, everyone. Very well done. Appreciate your time and attention, and staff, very well done. Thank you. Michael, you have one more comment?
Nope, just saying goodbye.
Okay.
All right. Good job. Good to see everybody.
Thank you all. Good to see everybody.